we're going to try Virasana, or the hero's pose. So this is one that, you know, very few people who are new to yoga are going to just suddenly be able to dive straight into, unless you're somebody who has been a kind of floor sitter for a lot of your lives. So most of us sit at desks and in the car and on the sofa and everything all day, but there will be some people who naturally do their makeup on the floor, or when they're at home watching TV or playing with their kids, might sit a little bit more on the floor. So some of these the things in this series of the TV poses might be a little bit easier for some people, but for most people they're pretty hard, and probably require as many props as you can muster. So for somebody who is really challenged by this pose, you can sit on a pile of blocks, you can sit on a bolster. So a bolster is probably the easiest one to illustrate the pose, because it kind of lets me show you what I want before we kind of really get into the nitty-gritty of the pose. So you want to sit on a bolster, a block, a pile of blocks, a pile of pillows, a pile of books. One of my teachers used to tell stories about sitting on piles of telephone books back in the day, and then just slowly over time removing pages or books and getting lower and lower into the pose. So if you need to start off quite high, that's fine. If you need to start off with your legs slightly apart because it really either affects your knees or your tops of your feet or anything like that, you can start like this, but ultimately we're trying to get the legs closer together from the thigh point of view, with the femurs parallel, the femur bones and thigh bones parallel to one another. The feet come out just slightly, so they're not directly underneath my sitting bones. They can't anyway in this position because the bolster is there. But if you were doing it without a block, or if you're doing it without a bolster or anything, you'd literally be sitting just between your heels on the floor. So this is kind of the makings of it. If you feel that the knees are uncomfortable in this pose at all, again, you can take the height. More stuff under the bottom, the better, really. You can use other things. You can put padding under the knees. You can put, some people really struggle with the tops of their feet. They're really very sensitive, really very tight. You can put blankets. You can, prop yourself up to make it as comfortable as possible, that you can actually sit here for a while and breathe. So I'm showing you from this angle with the bolster, and then I'm going to show you from the side with a block. So whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 blocks like this, or books like this, 1 or 2 or 3 blocks like this, as long as you can fit both your sitting bones on the block, which most of us should be able to. The block goes between the legs, and you sit both sitting bones on the block, feet just to the sides. You're trying ideally not to have the feet out like this or sickled in. You're trying to get them as straight as possible. Sorry, I'm cramping. Thighs parallel, and then we just sit up straight and breathe. So sitting like this for a long time can be challenging, so start slowly. While you're watching telly, line up a few of these poses and do this one for a minute, build up to 5 minutes, build up to 10 minutes. And then obviously through time, you slowly start to remove the height from underneath the sitting bones. Now I'm not very warmed up, but ideally, ultimately, you're sitting on the floor between the sitting bones. And then from here there are various variations that you can do. Some of them it feels better to have the block underneath, where you could, so the main pose is just sitting still, but you could hold the feet and come into a forward bend. Variation of child's pose. You could take a little twist to either side, Again, hold these things for half a minute, and build up if you can and you want to. Or hold them for 5 breaths or something like that. You know, don't just go into it and come straight out. Hold it for a little while. If you like, you can lean back in a twist. This is quite nice as well. Maybe a little bit more challenging if you're sitting on a lot of props. And then the same thing on the other side. Leaning back and twisting. And then from here we can move on to the more reclining versions of these. Now again, these are not for everybody, and if you struggle with this, you're going to struggle a lot more knee-wise, is really what we're worried about, with some of the reclining ones. So you can just stick with that for as long as, or until you get really, really comfortable in the pose. Once you're a bit more comfortable, you might be able to start coming into a reclined version where you just come onto your forearms and hold that for a while. You could, which is much more comfortable but still quite a challenge for a lot of people, is build yourself a little bed to lie on with some bolsters. I'm not sure I'm going to get the height right this moment. For me, actually, hang on a sec. But a range of different bolsters of different thicknesses, and you can play with these at home with pillows and things like that to see. I sometimes like to still sit on a block and then have another block or another pillow under my head, and then we do the same thing. So sitting on the block, heels next to you, and then leaning back, maybe making a pillow for the head with whatever you can find, and lots of possibilities for arm positions. You might want to just support yourself by having your hands here to help lift and keep the lift in your chest. Keep the tailbone tucked under, so you're really trying to lengthen the lower back as much as you can. Squeeze your glutes, so really engage your glutes, squeeze your butt to help do that. You could take your arms out at shoulder height to open up the chest. You could hold your arms above your head. There's any of these reclining positions. You know, you can play around with what feels good for you on a given day. Sometimes you really just want to open the chest. You've been sitting in a chair all day, you've been hunched up. So we're trying to reverse the forward folding that we do all day and open up the front body. So this will be a much more gentle version of the reclined version, Supta Virasana. And then we can do the one-legged version, which is much more challenging, and I keep one of these blocks handy. You might still want to sit on a block, same thing as the two-legged version, but this time you've got just one leg straight, one leg back, heels still on the outside, and sitting up straight like that, or taking the block out and starting to see if you can come down onto the forearms, and then ultimately you might be able to lie down completely. Oop, a bit squashed up here. I sometimes like a block under my head when I'm doing this version anyway. And if you've got really tight quads, I find that sometimes it helps to use your heel on your other foot to kind of press this bent leg down, trying to really stretch the quad muscle. But these versions here that I've shown you in the last few rounds are ones that you need to build up to. So start with the sitting ones, on a bolster, on the blocks, and then over time work up to the reclining ones.